Now on the search for a new Chicopee School Superintendent who will permanently replace former Superintendent Lynn Clark after she was arrested last year. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Tuesday. Welcome to Western Mass News at 10 here on Fox 6. I'm Chris Pisano. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson joining us live with more from tonight's meeting. Maria.
Chris, after 2 rounds of close votes, the Chicopee School Committee did not choose a superintendent. Instead, the committee will reconvene at a later time. A decision almost faced a major setback. Sandra Perrette, who is on the selection committee, began the meeting with a motion to postpone and possibly restart the selection process due to a potential conflict of interest from one of the other committee members.
Does this conflict of interest taint to the public the superintendent search? So I ask, should we vote tonight for the superintendent? Should we repost the position?
After some deliberation, the committee voted 7-4 to continue the process. Nearly 20 people applied for the position of Chicopee School Superintendent. And after narrowing the search down to 3 finalists earlier this month, the Chicopee School Committee gathered tonight with the intention of picking a candidate. However, decided to postpone the voting until a later date. Throughout tonight's deliberations, members of the committee were split on which candidate would best serve the Chicopee School District.
This is probably one of the most I'll say important decisions that we'll make as members of this school committee in today's, and I'll say in 2023. I can say that there are many words.
I get the feeling that we have a wonderful candidate for superintendent in Dr. Marcus Ware.
The search follows the dramatic exit of former Chicopee Public Schools Superintendent Lynn Clark. Clark is accused of lying to the FBI about sending threatening text messages to the Chicopee Police Chief candidate in November of 2021. She first told authorities she also received threatening text messages from an unknown number, but Clark later admitted to sending those messages to herself, according to federal investigators. Clark pleaded not guilty to those charges and is due back in court on February 28th. If convicted, Clark could face up to 5 years in federal prison and a fine up to $10,000. The school committee has not officially picked a date for their next meeting, but it must take place at least 48 hours from tonight's meeting in compliance with the open meeting laws. Reporting live in studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.
Maria, thank you.